Good morning. I usually like to do my thoughts with props. Sabah khair, sabah noor. I'm going to tell you a little story before I tell you about myself and what I do. Success, what's success? I heard this story this morning. A kid went to a guru, and he told the guru, I want to make a lot of money. What do I need to do? And this guru is the success guru. So the guru said, meet me at 4 in the morning at the beach, and I'll show you how to be successful and make a lot of money. So the kid said, okay. He went to the beach. The guru told him, let's go and take a swim. Now, this kid's not a good swimmer. He said, well, I didn't really come here to learn how to swim. I came here to learn how to make a lot of money. He said, no, just go in there. So he went in. Keep going. He kept going and going and going until the water reached on top of his head. Guru took his head and he forced it under the water. He kept it under the water for about a minute. Then he let the kid up. Guru told the kid, what's the thing you wanted to do the most while you were under the water? He looked at Guru and he said, breathe. I wanted to breathe. So Guru started laughing. He told him, when you want to succeed as much as you wanted that breath while you were under the water, that's when you make a lot of money. So that's a good lesson you need to learn. Now, I'm going to tell you about myself. My name is Basel Dalloul. I was born and raised in the United States. I was educated in the United States. I have degrees in electrical engineering, computer science, finance. I went to grad school and law school, and I specialize in mergers and acquisitions, but I run a tech company. I've always been a tech CEO. I started my career in the United States, and about 16 years ago, when I sold my last company to Henderson Consulting, my dad said, it's time for you to come to your part of the world and pay back. So 16 years ago, I came to Egypt to pay my part of the world back. He said, you know, there's this thing called the internet that everybody is excited about, and not too many people in this part of the world know much about. And maybe you can help them in Egypt. So I said, okay, fine. So I brought a team with me over here, and we started looking. When I came to Cairo, and this was in 1998, there were all of 2 megs worth of bandwidth coming through a government agency called AIESEC, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, that had 2 megs worth of bandwidth for the entire country. There was no data infrastructure. There were no ISPs. And there was no telecom Egypt. There wasn't even a Ministry of Information Technology and Communications. There was something called Arento, which بالعربي ده هيئة المصرية للاتصالات كانت تابعة لوزارة النقل. It's true. It's very true. And so we had our work cut out for us. So I came here with a team. We looked at the country. I went up and down throughout the entire country to see what the infrastructure was like that we could utilize from this high facility of the soil. And that one for me, it was shocking coming from the United States, seeing what I saw. But we said, you know what? This is our part of the world. We need to help it. So we looked at what we needed to do to build the infrastructure in Egypt. And we had a lot of challenges. We had challenges of where to set up our equipment, how to set up our equipment, how to give access to all of Egypt, all at the same time. And then the next challenge we had was, how do we collect for this service that we're going to provide? Now, how many of you have heard of the free internet? How many of you ever used the free internet? A lot of you. That was my doing. I'll tell you how that came about. Now, when I came here in 1998, and I looked at the infrastructure and I sat down with a bunch of very wonderful ladies who actually ran AIESEC GUC. على راسهم ست محترمة جدا جدا اسمها المهندسة عزة جرج. We laid out how we were going to provide access to everybody who had a telephone and a modem and a computer, no matter where you were in Egypt. And I asked the ladies that I was working with at the then AIESEC GUC, is there any way we could get you guys to pick up our bills for us? And they said, yeah, of course. We bill for our calls every day, and we can pick these bills up for you. And well, what do you mean you bill every day? Well, we charge for the local calls here in Egypt, and most of the region there. Now, this is something we don't do in the United States. We only charge for long distance calls. So I don't know if a light bulb went off. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. You charge for local calls? They said, yeah, we charge for local calls. I said, okay, this is wonderful. So we're going to move the traffic from your network to our data network. And you're not carrying that. And we want a large chunk of that fee that you charge the consumer. We ran some numbers. And we found out that for a certain percentage of that fee, we could afford to provide the internet effectively for free, which is where you got the free internet from. So we did that. Now, challenge number 2 was, okay, now we've done this. 150 minutes later, it's going to be worthwhile for the consumer to move to broadband. They said, well, we can't do that. And I said, why not? They said, well, we don't have enough copper wire to throw 2 copper wires to the same home. And I kind of looked at them perplexed, and I said, who said anything about 2 copper wires? We can unbundle the voice, and we can give you back the voice stream, take the data stream over the same line that comes into the home, and provide Egypt with broadband service. They looked at me as if I came from Mars when I told them this. And we proved it to them. We took 3 COs. We did a test bed. I brought my engineers back from the States with me. And we showed them how to unbundle voice and data. And we created what you guys all use today as the ADSL service. No, we're not done yet. Unfortunately, the service in Egypt, as most of you talk about it on Facebook and other places, sucks. It's slow, customer service is bad, technical support is bad. It tends to be somewhat expensive for the crappy service that you get, right? All right, we're going to change that. Now, 15 years ago, I got out of the 2 businesses that I created here. Free internet and broadband service. Why did I do that? I did that because at the time, the government issued 9 too many more licenses than the promises they would. They allowed anyone who wanted to resell internet service to resell it, which is not the way to start a nascent business. And they allowed what became Telecom Egypt not only to wholesale to us their infrastructure, to rent us space in their COs, to provide us with power, and all that other infrastructure, they allowed them to compete with us. This was a huge mistake. It still is. Today, your country, according to the numbers that I looked at, has about 100 million people in it. About 15% of the homes in Egypt have broadband service in them. That's kind of abysmal. When countries in the Gulf have penetration rates of over 70%. Now, nothing against the people in the Gulf, God bless them. But they didn't even exist as countries 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So we need to do something about this over here in Egypt. And NOOR, my company, is now working on that. There was a video I wanted to show you of a program in the United States that aired on a channel called HBO. I think you got it here on OSN. How many of you are familiar with the program Newsroom? Okay, on the Newsroom, in its first season, they were sending journalists to Egypt during the revolution. And one of the biggest problems they had was when the government decided to cut off the telephone service, the mobile service, and the internet. There was no mobile, there was no internet. How many of you remember that? There was one network that had 84 live feeds coming out of Egypt. Do any of you know who that network was? It was NOOR. It was my network. We refused to cut the internet in Egypt. Now, because we created the original infrastructure, we had ways to keep our infrastructure running that nobody knew how to cut, unless we cut it. And I made a phone call to the then minister and the prime minister. I told them, listen, I got out of consumer business because you guys screwed it up. And I focused on enterprise. Now, my network carries about 80% of the banking system in Egypt. It carries almost all of the exchange system in Egypt. It carries most of the airports in Egypt. It carries practically every multinational in this country. It carries all the airlines, all the petroleum companies. We even carry the armies and the police's traffic. I told the minister, if you want me to shut down my network, if I do shut down my network, this country is going to hell in a handbasket. And I'm not shutting it down. I'm not going to be responsible for that. So they said, okay, you're right, keep your network up and running. So we kept it up and running. Now, we had a very small footprint of consumers back then, and growing now. But anyone who was using our service had internet service. Most of the multinationals did not ask their expat employees to leave because they were still connected. Most of the airports were operating because they were connected. Masr Tayran was able to keep its planes flying because we kept them connected. Now, after I came back, after the revolution, I was on my way back to the United States. I stopped in London. I was ready to come over here, and of course the airport did close for a while. But when I came back, the generals asked me over to see them, and I asked my government and military relations director, I said, is this good or is this a bad thing? He said, well, this is a good thing. They want to thank you, actually, for keeping the network up. So we have a good army. They kept the network up, and they thank me for keeping the network up. Now, we plan on focusing some energy on the consumer market again, so we'll be hearing a lot about us through social media and other places. We're going to be participating in a lot of youth events like this and showing you what true leadership is about. I want to tell you something about you guys. You're either graduated or you're about to graduate. Is that true? All right. Now, I agree with most everything I heard from the previous two speakers, with the exception of one thing. Keep your expectations very high. If you keep your expectations low, you're never going to get anywhere. Regarding people. No, even people. You should always expect the best from them. I expect the best of my engineers. If I expected very little from them, I wouldn't have gone. I'll show you an example. I have something to share with you over here. During the revolution, all of you heard of all these copper cables that are being considered in الشوارع وبيبتدع سنترال عشان نقبل المحاسبة طاقة صح؟ We had to come up with solutions for our customers. Now, the canned solution that's out there is to use the mobile networks, the mobile towers that provide mobile internet and mobile office through a huge router like this. This is made by Cisco. This is the thing that you see sitting in a box on top of ATM machines in a lot of places. It's covered with a big, ugly wooden box or maybe a bread box. This thing costs about $1,200 to $1,800, depending on how it's configured. I challenged my young Egyptian engineers, of whom I had very, very high expectations, to come up with a solution that was a lot more cost-effective than this, that we could put literally on a car or a truck or inside an ATM machine that was completely secure. We provided them with a wonderful, we still provide our team members with a wonderful, highly interactive environment to work in. I encourage teamwork. You should always work in teams. We encourage training, and you should always seek out good training. And what my Egyptian engineers came up with, that are no older than the folks I see sitting out here, was this little box. This does 4 times the work that that Cisco box does. Costs $120. And is made in Egypt with software developed by Egyptian engineers. I will have you off. So, keep your expectations high. Always look to do the undoable. Never take no for an answer. A wise man once told me, every no you get gets you one no closer to a yes. Be persistent. Be resilient. The lady that I respectfully disagreed with earlier, who agreed with something she did say, change is the only constant that you will find in your life. Moving on. I reinvent my company once every 6 months. And we have to do that because in the world I live in, the technology world, technology changes at the speed of light. So we have to change along with it. Otherwise, like the Nokia example they have been over here used, they'll become obsolete. You'll lose market share. You might even cease to exist. Every single one of my competitors that I started with no longer exist. They no longer exist because they fought a very bad and ugly fight with each other. In order to rescue them, the government forced the mobile companies to acquire them in order to get their 3G licenses. So they part of what we need. What used to be Raya is now part of Vodafone. And what used to be Nylon Line, EGNet, Sophicom, and some other smaller ones are all part of the Salat. The only remaining independent network in Egypt is NOOR. refused to cut the internet when everyone else just followed like sheep and did what they were told. So, I know this might be a bad example to use, but don't be sheep. Don't be followers, be leaders. Don't take no for an answer. Don't conform. Always come up with something new. And the one thing that you absolutely have to do is have a passion for what you do. If you want to be a real leader, you got to be passionate about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Keep yourself up to date. Again, a good example, two ladies mentioned earlier. Read. The first thing the Archangel Gabriel told our prophet, what was it? Read. So, reading is good. I read 3 to 5 books a week. Sometimes on my Kindle, sometimes on my iPad. Sometimes I like the feeling of a real book. And I read a lot. The moment you stop learning is the time that's the moment it's time for you to go 6 feet under. You never stop learning until the day you die.